When I was a teen, I loved Star Wars. It started out with me watching the original trilogy when I was 8 or 9, but I didn't become a fan then, because I was scared of the trash compactor in episode 4. I was a weird kid. But I watched the films again when I was about 12, and I fell in love. I grew up on the original cuts, as my parents were anti-special edition and anti-prequel. I did later watch both out of curiosity, and the sequel trilogy was coming out during my teen years. I was 13 when The Force Awakens came out and 17 when The Rise of Skywalker came out. I recall rewatching all the Star Wars films before Rise of Skywalker's release, but that's the last time I saw anything Star Wars related. I've never watched The Clone Wars, I've never watched the Disney shows except maybe 2 episodes of The Mandalorian. I wish to rectify all of this, but before I get that done, I want to ask, do the movies hold up? Not only am I a much different person now, being an almost 24-year-old adult in college, but the Star Wars landscape has shifted a lot, with online discourse being in full sequel backlash, as those who grew up with the prequel era vehemently defend those films. I believe this is something similar to the Sonic nostalgia cycle, how games that were once reviled are reevaluated by the fans who grew up with them, and I have no doubt that a similar reevaluation will happen with the sequel trilogy given another 5 to 10 years. But I'm not here to talk about the future, I'm here to talk about these films now in the present moment. I want to make a few disclaimers here. I will be watching all 9 films in the Skywalker saga, as well as Solo and Rogue One, and reevaluating the films. First off, respectful disagreement and discussion is always welcome, but anti-woke chuds and people who harass others for their opinions on a fictional series are not welcome here. I will ban anyone who makes reductionist and hateful comments. I want to clarify again that everything I say here is my own opinion, and I am not trying to be objective, but I am being fair. I want to see the good and the bad in these films and what could have been done differently. I want to have a conversation and get my own thoughts out there. I am really tired of the lack of media literacy on the internet, and people just being overly positive or negative on things without giving them the proper nuance they deserve. As a final note, there will be spoilers for all the Star Wars films. Now, for the first episode in this saga, I will be talking about the first episode in the Star Wars saga, Episode 1, The Phantom Menace. I'm not going to give too much background into what Star Wars is, but what you need to know is that these films were not released in chronological story order, with episodes 4 to 6 being released first. For the sake of keeping track of the story, I'm going to be going in chronological order based on the film's story rather than release order. I first watched Phantom Menace when I was 13 or so, and I'm sorry to say that most of the trade politics went over my head. I've seen the film a few times and always thought that this was the most boring and pointless Star Wars film. I'll get into that in a bit, and how my thoughts have evolved on this rewatch, but for now, what is this film about anyway? The Galactic Republic is embroiled in trade disputes, with the Trade Federation, represented by Newt Gunray, has blockaded the planet of Naboo, stopping all trade to the planet in protest of new taxes the Federation has to pay. Chancellor Valorum of the Republic sends 2 Jedi Knights, Qui-Gon Jinn and his apprentice Obi-Wan Kenobi, to settle the dispute. Sith Lord Darth Sidious orders Gunray to kill the Jedi, and they escape to Naboo, where they meet Jar Jar Binks, an outcast of the underwater Gungan race. The Gungans don't get along with the surface people, the humanoid Naboo, but Jar Jar was cast out of his city for being clumsy. The Jedi go to the underwater city with Jar Jar and ask the Gungan leader, Boss Nass, to help resolve the crisis, but he declines. After leaving Naboo with one of the surface Queen Amidala's handmaidens, Padme, en route to the Republic capital of Coruscant, the Trade Federation damages the ship, but the Jedi are saved by a droid named R2-D2, and the crew crash land on the remote desert planet of Tatooine, where they must acquire ship parts. Obi-Wan stays with the ship while Qui-Gon, Padme, Jar Jar, and R2-D2 go to the city of Mos Espa to locate new ship parts. They encounter an alien named Watto, who has the necessary parts but refuses to accept Republic currency and fails to be persuaded by Qui-Gon's mind tricks. The group encounters a young boy named Anakin Skywalker, who is Watto's slave. He offers the group shelter from the sandstorm and takes them to his home, where he introduces his mother and a droid he is building, C-3PO. He tells the group he loves to go pod racing, and is the only human who can do it. Qui-Gon senses a strong presence of the Force in Anakin and barters with Watto for his freedom and the ship parts if he wins the race, but is unable to buy his mother's freedom. Anakin wins the pod race and is freed, but on the way off the planet, Qui-Gon encounters a mysterious hooded figure who is trained in the Jedi arts. He escapes onto the ship, and the crew go to Coruscant, where Qui-Gon asks the Jedi Council for permission to train Anakin. The Council refused due to sensing a clouded future. Qui-Gon is concerned about the figure he fought in the desert and expresses this to the Jedi, who insist the Sith are extinct. Meanwhile, Senator Palpatine negotiates with Queen Amidala for a way to resolve the dispute and calls for a vote of no confidence in Chancellor Valorum, holding an emergency election and making Palpatine Chancellor. Little do they know that Palpatine orchestrated the entire trade dispute to get into power, but that plot thread will be explored in future films. The Trade Federation prepares to launch a ground invasion of Naboo using battle droids, and Padme reveals herself to the Gungans as the real queen, saying that the queen we have seen was a decoy. She enlists the help of the Gungan army, and Jar Jar is made general. The Gungans and droids fight on the ground, while Padme and the Jedi go inside the palace to capture Gunray, but they encounter the man from the desert who is a Sith Lord named Darth Maul. Anakin hides in the cockpit of a ship and starts it on autopilot, eventually overriding it and destroying the ship that powers the battle droids, causing them to deactivate. Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan go to face Maul, while Padme and her men capture Gunray. Qui-Gon is wounded in the battle, causing Obi-Wan to become angry and bisect Maul, who falls down an airshaft. Qui-Gon insists that Obi-Wan train Anakin before he dies. The trade war is won for now, and the Council grants Obi-Wan permission to train Anakin, but Yoda shares his reservations with Obi-Wan. Palpatine congratulates everyone on their victory and says he will be watching Anakin's career with great interest. At Qui-Gon's funeral, Obi-Wan tells Anakin he will train him. There is a parade in Naboo to celebrate the victory, and Padme presents a glowing orb to Boss Nass as a peace treaty. Roll credits. Now I'm going to go over all the superficial stuff that doesn't pertain to the main plot, the meat dressing if you will. The special effects are a mixed bag, as I feel a lot of the CGI hasn't aged too well, no matter how groundbreaking it was for the time. Jar Jar especially was done with motion capture, and the outdated CGI makes him look a bit strange walking next to the human characters. That being said, the CGI backgrounds and vistas, as well as certain effects like Obi-Wan's ship phasing in, are really appealing to look at, and most of the CGI creatures aren't too distracting. The underwater city is gorgeous, and the Naboo surface is great looking as well. Tatooine feels appropriately dry and desolate, and Coruscant's beautiful vistas mask the corruption in the Republic. As for the sound design, I'm not sure if it's just my TV or the Disney Plus version of the film, but the audio balancing was pretty bad for me. Between the quieter dialogue scenes and the action scenes, the dialogue was way too quiet compared to the action. Balancing aside, though, Star Wars has always had great sound design, and this is no exception. The sound effects make the action scenes feel so much more vivid and intense. The cinematography itself is great, especially in the pod race scene, where Anakin is trying to fix his pod on the fly, and we see his hands on the gauge, the cuts to different camera angles, etc. The film feels grand in scope, as it should, although I wish we saw a little more fighting in space. Oh well. The soundtrack is excellent, no complaints there. I find there to be so many memorable pieces, like when the battle droids appear, the underwater city music, Qui-Gon's funeral, and of course Duel of the Fates. Even the ending song feels appropriately celebratory. Star Wars is like Sonic the Hedgehog. You can complain all you want about it, but the music is always excellent. Now for the acting, divorced from the character writing. Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon is the standout here and really embodies the character, making you feel his conviction. Ian McDiarmid's Palpatine doesn't have a lot to do in this one, but the scenes he does have set him up as an appropriately sinister mastermind. Ewan McGregor doesn't have a lot to do as Obi-Wan here, but he has his moments with Qui-Gon and Coruscant, and during Qui-Gon's death scene. Jake Lloyd is a serviceable Anakin, and I don't believe in judging child actors too harshly. We probably shouldn't have child actors at all, but that's another discussion entirely. I think Padme was one of Natalie Portman's first roles, and again, she does a fine job, but hasn't really found her footing yet. Awkward mocap aside, which isn't his fault, Ahmed Best does a good job embodying the lovable, clumsy nature of Jar Jar. The script itself is more of a mixed bag, but I think it's pretty good for not being substantially proofread. You can tell when George got divorced and no longer had his wife to edit for him. There are some good lines here, my favorite being Qui-Gon to Jar Jar. The ability to speak does not make you intelligent, which is something I like to throw around a lot. One of the Gungans telling Jar Jar, "You're gonna be in big doo-doo this time," made me laugh. There's a good joke with the droids as C-3PO has not yet been completed and R2 calls him naked with beeps and boops and C-3PO reacts to it. For some reason, the subtitle, cursing in Huttese, makes me laugh. I think Anakin's mom telling him, "You can't stop the change," is a good bit of advice, as well as Qui-Gon saying gamblers will inevitably lose. When Anakin leaves home and asks if he'll ever see his mom again, she asks him what his heart tells him. He says, "I hope so, yes, I guess," which, knowing what happens in the next film, is a good bit of foreshadowing. A scene during the land battle where one of the other Gungans tells Jar Jar not to give up, and the two immediately put their hands up and say they give up when intimidated, is hilarious. As is the comedic bit of Jar Jar fainting when he is appointed general. The rest of the dialogue isn't remarkable, but it's fine. There is one typo in the script when the nominees for the Chancellor are being announced, and one of them is Bail Antilles from Alderaan, which I assume is referring to Bail Organa, as Antilles is a different character. Regardless, if it is Bail Organa, I really wish he won instead of Palpatine. There are some world-building issues, such as the fact that Padme is the queen, but she was elected at 14, and the Jedi saying Anakin 9 is too old to take the Jedi test. Like, seriously, how does that work? Wouldn't you be smarter as you get older? Oh well. Also, there's a big issue of telling rather than showing, as Padme keeps saying her people are dying, but we don't see any on-the-ground conflict until the end of the film, or see the effects of the trade blockade on her people. And now I have to talk about this film's fatal flaw, and some annoying continuity issues as well. It's Anakin. In this film, Anakin is too young. Starting the trilogy with the protagonist at 9 years old, when Luke was around 19 at the start of the original trilogy, gives us less time with adult Anakin's actor, and the 10-year time jump feels unnecessary. I would argue that the pacing of the entire trilogy has issues. Obi-Wan is supposed to be 25 in this film, which would make him around 57 in A New Hope. He is implied to be older than that. I mistakenly said he was supposed to be 19 in my 2020 unscripted review, but 25 is still too young for how old he should be. As much as I love Qui-Gon, he isn't necessary to this story. His existence raises the question of, had he lived and trained Anakin, would things be different? But in the original trilogy, Obi-Wan says he was trained by Yoda, not Qui-Gon. If Obi-Wan had just been older, if Anakin was a teenager, maybe 14 or 15, if Padme was going to be that age, I would have been okay with that. Honestly, what this film establishes, the existence of Darth Sidious, the fact that there are always two Sith, Obi-Wan training Anakin, and him being an ex-slave who misses his mother, plus Palpatine manipulating trade politics, can all be explained quickly in another film. I would rather Attack of the Clones be the first film in the trilogy with some modifications to explain what I just stated, and then the second film be set during the Clone Wars with Revenge of the Sith largely unchanged. Honestly, this film's weird pacing and plot decisions kind of ruins the pacing of the trilogy in my opinion. But back to Anakin, he shows no hint of darkness other than fear, which is normal. I can't believe I'm about to praise Harry Potter, but young Tom Riddle, who would grow up to become Voldemort, was handled much better than this, especially in the films. He was a sympathetic child with a tragic backstory, but he was nonetheless cold, detached, and creepy, which is how Anakin comes across in the next film, but nothing here. I really think they should have just given Hayden Christensen 3 movies to work with. My next problem is Padme's age in general. I don't like the age gap at all, and hate how toxic and weird the relationship gets, given he knew her as a child and became obsessed with her. But even that aside, why is Padme an elected official at 14? It seems that Queen is just a title for president or prime minister, given that Padme is elected and serves 2 terms as queen. It would make more sense for her to be queen at that age in a traditional monarchy, but why is Naboo holding elections for children? It would make so much more sense for them to both start at 19 or 20, or even Padme be older than him but then meet as adults. While child Anakin is a delight, he is unnecessary and tonally inconsistent character with who Anakin would become. Also, Natalie Portman doesn't look 14, she was 18 in real life, whereas Jake Lloyd was 10 playing a 9-year-old. This makes the age gap feel even more pronounced. And yeah, at its core, Phantom Menace is a kid's film. This isn't bad in and of itself, but for one, it is going to be contrast tonally with the rest of the trilogy going forward, particularly Revenge of the Sith, but we'll get to that. But the main thing that annoys me is the confusing trade politics in this kid's film. Like, I don't think I really understood the Naboo situation until watching it recently as an adult, and even then I had to look it up to get the full context. In a film so geared toward young audiences, such dry political humdrum feels out of place. And I think pacing is at the heart of the issue. Yes, the pacing in the entire trilogy is bad, as 90% of this film could be cut or reworked into the next film, and nothing of value to the overall saga would be lost. But the pacing within the film is rough. The action sequences are few and far between. We have the opening fight, the underwater escape sequence, and then after a slow 40 minutes or so, we get the pod race, which, well, I love it, gets a little long, and shortly after the brief encounter with Malo in the desert. The rest of the film is relatively slow-paced until the third act, which serves as an action set piece. Jar Jar Binks, everybody's favorite or least favorite clumsy Gungan, is one of the most contentious Star Wars characters, to the point where the hate got so bad that the actor contemplated suicide. Seriously, don't do that, people. But I found myself quite liking him. C-3PO, the iconic Star Wars droid and comic relief of the original trilogy, has a relatively minor role in this film as Anakin is building him. Jar Jar takes the place of C-3PO as comic relief in this one, and it's a nice change of pace. I am not the right person to comment on whether the Gungan accents are offensive, but I found Jar Jar's antics always getting him into shit, literally in some cases, to be charming. He seems to be a well-meaning guy who is extremely clumsy and awkward, and an outcast from his tribe. As someone with ADHD, I found him relatable. I'm glad he's finally recognized as a hero in this one, but given what happens in later films, I am not hopeful for his long-term prospects of being well-liked in-universe. Out of universe, people seem a lot softer on him nowadays, thankfully. Again, you don't have to like the character, but the hate was majorly overblown, especially when this film has major structural and narrative issues that affect the rest of the trilogy. Now, on to by far the best character in this film, that of course being Qui-Gon Jinn, despite his dubious place in Star Wars continuity, and the fact that he could have been cut from the universe. He is a lovable and well-meaning character in this film, who unfortunately is misguided in wanting to train Anakin. He questions the Jedi Order on this, which I appreciate, although his staunch belief in the Chosen One prophecy is of course everyone's downfall. I think this prophecy is dumb to begin with. Anakin could have just been a super powerful Gary Stu because of his midichlorian count. He didn't also need to be Jesus Christ, but I digress. Qui-Gon also assumes a father figure role for the short time he knows Anakin, and this I like a lot. Again, it is a bit odd for Annie's mom to trust this strange man right away, but when he offers to free your son, I suppose it's hard to argue. What I do like about Qui-Gon's inclusion is how reluctant Obi-Wan is to train Anakin, and how he only does it to fulfill his master's dying wish, which creates an interesting dynamic between the two. However, I think Obi-Wan could have had Qui-Gon's role, and Yoda could be the one reluctant to train Anakin, as he already is, and Qui-Gon can be cut entirely, and thus much of the film can be cut. I really wish they had structured the trilogy differently, but at face value, most of the emotional beats in this film involve Qui-Gon, and the film is about 3 times better for including him in its current state. Palpatine doesn't get much screen time in this film, but we can already see him scheming to create his empire by creating the trade war and pressuring Queen Amidala to make him the new chancellor. Even from the beginning, his cunning wit and fake concern for the fate of democracy make me boil with rage, as they should. Palpatine is a terrifyingly realistic portrayal of a corrupt politician, minus the finger lighting, of course. He will get a lot more to do in the following films, but this is a harrowing introduction. I love how he says he will be watching Anakin's career with great interest. God damn. And there are some scenes that work here. One that got me particularly is where Anakin says goodbye to his mother, the foreshadowing of it. If he'll ever see her again, knowing what happens in the next film is a gut punch, in addition to the good advice she gives Anakin that will ultimately go unheeded, and then he puts on his backpack and leaves. And that one music cue plays. I've always thought of it as Luke's theme, but I've seen people call it Binary Sunset, the Force theme, and even Obi-Wan's theme, latter of which it definitely isn't, but I digress. I also like the scene with Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon and Coruscant in that gorgeous sunset, where Qui-Gon says he will train Anakin, and Anakin will become a Jedi, and tells Obi-Wan he has much to learn. The third act is fun, and the duel with Darth Maul is epic. I'm glad they included the Qui-Gon funeral scene before the celebrations of Anakin, worrying about his future. That's something I don't like about A New Hope, how abruptly we cut to celebrations after a bunch of people die. I'll save the big Starklighter rant for another day, but yeah, I would say Phantom Menace ends on a good note. Also, someone pointed out that the parade music at the end is a sped-up version of Palpatine's theme, and like, holy shit, it's like poetry, it rhymes. If I'm being objective, or at least trying to be, in all honesty, this is an extremely flawed film. I never claimed to be objective, and in terms of personal enjoyment, I definitely liked it more this time around. I would rate it about a 6 out of 10, but Liam Neeson is doing a lot of the heavy lifting here. Also, shout out to John Williams, as always. The score makes every scene better. Hey guys, so I'm sorry this video took longer to get out than I wanted. I have been having some health issues and overall burnout. I'll just put a reminder here to be civil in the comments. The 3 topics that must never be brought up at a Thanksgiving dinner are religion, politics, and Star Wars, which is to say Star Wars talk gets heated. Please remember at the end of the day that it's just a film and people will have differing opinions. Anyway, if you liked the video, how about you like the video? Subscribe to see more and comment Qui-Gon is the GOAT if you've got this far. I also have my 18+ Discord server and other social media linked in the description. Cheers!